Doc here, frequency and period, and I'm going to take you through three levels of questions. The first one can be thought of as being the easiest, or we'll say a C level question, and then a little harder one, B level, and then finally the hardest, A. And by taking you gradually from the easier to the hardest, I hope that when we're finished this little tutorial, that the hardest question appears easy for you. The C level question: what is the frequency if the period is equal to 2 seconds? Well, we want the frequency, so we have the frequency formula relating it to the period. F is 1 over t. We plug in for the t. We substitute t equals 2. It's 1 over 2, 1 half, 0.5 hertz. That's the answer. You could arrive at this another way without the formula. If you reason out from the definitions, the period t is 2 seconds and frequency is how many you're doing per second. So if it takes you 2 seconds to do 1, you're doing 1/2 per second. The next level is the B level. What is the frequency if the period is 0.2 seconds? So we have a decimal here. It makes this a little bit harder. Using the same formula, F is 1 over t, and substituting for the t, 0.2, we have this division to do. I like to make it look friendly, like numbers that relate to money. So you could always put a decimal point after that 1 and tack on 2 zeros. You could tack on a 0 at the end of that 2. It's not going to change anything. And this says $1 divided by 20 cents, and the answer is 5. 5 hertz in this case. Another way to approach this, F is 1 over 2 tenths, is to do it like my 5th grade teacher taught me many years ago, how to divide by fractions, because they were scary when you first encounter fractions. And if you've been away from math for a while, you may say, whoa, divided by fractions, what's that? Here's how you do it. She says, you keep, change, and invert. That's the rule. You keep the numerator, the 1. You change the division to the multiplication, and then you invert the fraction. 2 over 10 becomes 10 over 2. So keep the numerator, change the division to multiplication, and then invert the fraction. Keep, change, invert. And then 2 into 10 is 5. 5 hertz. We have the answer. Here is the A level question. What is the frequency if the period is 2 little m little s? That's milliseconds. And remember that m is the metric prefix for milli, and millisecond is 1,000th of a second. So that's 2,000ths of a second. I have my formula, F is 1 over t, but now I have to deal with the decimal. This is 2,000ths of a second. You move the decimal point over from the 2 3 times to the left. 1, 2, 3. Another way to do this is to say, well, what's 0.2? 0.2 is 2 tenths. And then what's 2 hundredths? 2 hundredths is 0.02. And then 2 thousandths, another 0, so 0.002. So you can kind of work up to it that way, as long as you remember that milli stands for 1,000th. Then we can approach this a couple of ways. One way is to, when you have a fraction like this, you multiply the top and bottom by the same number. And if I move the decimal point over 3 times on the denominator, I must do that to the numerator, and then I can divide 2 into 1,000 and get my answer, 500 hertz. But remember the 5th grade teacher I had, Mrs. Corsi. She said if you want to divide by a fraction, and really the 2,000ths, right, 2 milliseconds is 2,000ths. That's just writing down what it is, 2,000ths. She says you keep, change, and invert. So you keep the 1, change the division to multiplication, and invert the fraction, which is 2,000ths. Becomes 1,000 over 2. 1 times anything is anything, so you don't have to worry about that. It's just 2 into 1,000, 500 hertz. Now, students taking lab, I recommend to remember a variation of the formula because milliseconds show up from time to time. And here's your regular formulas. F is 1 over t, t is 1 over f. That deals with seconds. But if you want to deal with t in milliseconds, you can prepare the situation by just having 1,000 there and 1,000 here. This is a variation of this formula, and it's easy to see where that 1,000 comes from. If t is in seconds, you have the 1 over f, but if t is in milliseconds, they're really tiny. So you would have 1,000. If the answer here is 1 second, well, if you want milliseconds, there'd be 1,000. See, so that's why you have to have the 1,000 here. And then remember, these formulas flip. You can exchange the f and the t, and you're okay with that variation of the formula. So think about keeping this one in your bag of tricks also. You don't need to, but I think it's helpful when you look at milliseconds.